Hello and welcome to today's SGI webinar, Large Format Device Benchmarking. My name is Dan Marks. I'm SGI's Vice President of Markets and Technologies, and I'll be the moderator for today's program. On behalf of SGI, I'd like to welcome you and let you know our webinar system allows you to ask questions through your computer. So if you have questions at any time, feel free to submit them and we'll get to them at the end of the formal presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce David Hunter, our presenter today. David has been helping companies control and manage their color for over 20 years, primarily in the graphic arts and photography marketplaces. He's been teaching the 5-day Implementing Color Management course at the PIA GATF Graphic Arts Technical Foundation since its inception in 1996, and the Advanced Color Management course since 1997. He's the project manager for Ideal Alliance IPA Color Management Certification Program, the first program available on the internet to teach and certify professionals in color control topics. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Hunter. David.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
So today's presentation is going to cover large format device benchmarking. And essentially what this means is that when companies go out to purchase an output device, traditionally they'll purchase the device based on the format size and the media that the device can handle. They oftentimes don't take a deeper dive into the actual physical capabilities of what that device is capable of, especially when it comes to color. So this presentation is to help you see a new way to benchmark your output devices, ideally before you purchase them. But if you already have purchased output devices, you can perform this benchmark that you're going to learn about today. You can perform this on your existing devices so you can start to know what normal is. What is your output device capable of? And how does your ViewTech compare with your Inca compared to your Colorado? So this presentation does name names. I don't represent any large format companies here, so these numbers that I share in terms of my statistics in the survey that I've done is just an ongoing study, and I don't mean to call any manufacturer out, good or bad. It's just what it is. And if any of you attendees want to submit your data to me to add into this report, I'll be happy to do that so that we can have my goal is to have a broad range assessment of how different devices manufacture color and do the research for you so people can access this research and see what the state of the art is of different output devices at any point in time. So with that being said, I'm going to get into a couple definitions before we get into the heart of this presentation that I think are important to know. When we're defining color differences within, like one of our first tests is to define how consistently a large format device images the same color around the imaging area. And so one of the metrics that we use is a metric called delta E, which is a definition of, it's a metric that defines the difference between two individual colors. The larger the number, the bigger the difference. And the key part is it's one color compared to another. Now, another metric that we use is called the cumulative relative frequency at the 95th percentile of delta E. So this is a version of delta E, but it's more like comparing process color. So comparing the difference between two pages with a delta E number, which is in line with delta E. So what this means is if you have a flat orange on one printer and a flat orange on another printer, let's say the delta E between the two is 6, and then you have a set of images and artwork around that orange, and the 95th percentile cumulative relative frequency is a 6, the relative visual perception of the difference will be about the same. So it's very easy to now quantify color differences, not only for specific colors, but for entire pages of content. So think of this as delta E for process colors. And by the way, we have a lot more supporting information on this if anyone's interested. In terms of additional terminology, one of the key things that we look at when we're benchmarking a printer is the precision of the device. And precision comes in different flavors, including the consistency within how the device images the same color value within a page, as well as within a job, meaning multiple pages in a row, as well as between jobs, meaning day over day. So what is the precision of the device in terms of being consistent to itself? And this is different than accuracy, which accuracy says, how close am I coming to my reference condition, which could be something like Grackle. So how close is my device to Grackle? And if I have 5 devices, and I'm trying to make all 5 devices match one another, ideally I would have them all try to match Grackle, and then they'll all match one another. And the more accurate each one is to Grackle, the more accurate they will be to one another. So to benchmark a device capability, we really need to look at both precision and accuracy. Now, this audit process includes test forms. These are PDF forms, and here's a picture of one of the PDF forms that we have for companies that have a device like a Barbieri or a ISIS with thin paper. This form is very useful. We also have another form for a device like actually this form is not so good for a Barbieri. The other form is more for a Barbieri or an X-Rite i1, especially when you're printing on thicker substrates. So everyone attending this seminar today has access to these PDF files that you can use to actually image on your output devices. And we give you the instructions to, and the data files necessary to measure the targets into your software, and then using our tools, we can help you define how accurate and how precise your printers are capable of performing. So these forms actually work for digital presses as well as proofers. It's really process agnostic in terms of how you can apply these forms to your printers. Now, an industry poll not too long ago of 1,500 printers showed that some of the top issues that printers were seeing were not being able to match color on the same device between jobs, not being able to match specific spot colors close enough, and not matching color between devices. So this benchmark helps answer each one of these questions and allows us to quantify, well, is the problem in how your device images color, or is it in the process that you use to profile and apply the profile to your device? So there's a lot of variables, as many of you know, related to making color do what you want it to do. And this benchmark presentation, it helps you divide out, where is the problem? Is the problem in the printer itself, or is the problem in the workflow and the color conversion going on to get to that printer? So these are normal or old-fashioned considerations for buying a printer. These are some of the new considerations that we cover in this presentation. So we define what the range of color is of the device, and this defines the gamut or range of color of a given printing process. And if I'm trying to make my printing process match Grackle, then I better have a larger gamut than Grackle to begin with, so that I can, if necessary, dumb it down to match Grackle to give me my end result. Now, there's certain situations where you don't want to dumb it down at all, like when you're trying to match spot colors. You want to take advantage of the entire range of color that that output device is capable of. And even for certain process color work, if you never have to match something on an offset press, why match Grackle? We have a profile called a Chroma Checker wide gamut profile, which is G7 in nature, meaning it has gray balance and tonality, but it has no theoretical limit in terms of the range of color of the output device. So that when you use this profile in your workflow, you are optimizing the range of color that your device is capable of producing while keeping it in a G7 gray balanced and tonality form. So your flesh colors will still be flesh, your green grass will be green, your gray instrument will be gray. So these are different purchase considerations when you're looking at your printer. We'll also talk about how to define the precision and the accuracy. And then one of the most important things is comparing the machine capabilities with your actual expectations. And this is where it becomes really important, because I've seen people buy a printer expecting that I can get, let's say, target red on the printer, and you take delivery of the printer, and the printer can't hit target red within my expectations, and there's a disconnect. And I've seen both salespeople for printers lose their jobs and people who have bought printers lose their jobs because they made, let's say, a bad decision. Now, when we're defining expectations, we have a little exercise. It's a free exercise online called your E-factor exercise. And your E-factor is your expectation for a color match. And it quantifies what a person's level of expectation is for two colors or two pages to match one another. Now, once we know what your expectation is, then we can apply this to the printing device to know whether or not the machine capability is capable of rendering color to your expectations. So we bridge this gap of what are your expectations versus what are the machine capabilities, and help you define that, yes, this machine will meet your expectations, or no, it will not. Now, let's get into the first test that we do. The first test we do is we check what the gamut is of the device. So what's the range of color that my output device is capable of producing? So if I have a certain reflex blue that I need to print on this device, so like a Ford blue, do I know if that Ford blue is in gamut or out of gamut? And here we see it's out of gamut, and it's 5.39 delta E out of gamut. So this is beyond a customer expectation. If their expectation was of E-factor of a 5, you would know right away that, at least for this printer and this substrate, you're not going to create this blue to your customer's expectations, so you should not buy this printer. Okay, so that's a scenario for gamut and range of color. Now, the next thing we look at is consistency. Does the imaging device image color in the upper left-hand corner the same as the lower right-hand corner? How consistent is the color within the page? And a derivative of that is, if I'm doing a 4-page job, is the first page the same as the 4th page? And if I'm printing this job consistently over time, is how this page imaged on Monday, January 15th, the same as Friday, February 19th? Now, obviously, this can range based on operator. It can range based on the maintenance that you perform on the device. So here's where you get the ability to document what's been done to the device in this time period in order to get you the color that you need. And when you're dealing with multiple devices, now it comes down to, hey, how well are my different printers printing the same color? Because if I'm doing a vehicle wrap and I need the volume and I need to print different pieces on different printers, I want to make sure that when these pieces come together, they're all going to match one another. So this is when we start talking about how well does the printer match the given reference target condition. And then lastly, one of our exercises allows you to check what is the resolution of the device, because oftentimes devices have different levels of resolution based on how many passes the device goes through, which affects your throughput and your productivity of the device. So we have a benchmark that allows you to quantify what is the necessary resolution in order for you to be accepting of this printer. And it's really interesting because I've seen multiple devices that all say they're maybe, let's say, 600 dots per inch. And you look at the difference at 600 dots per inch, and it's like, clearly 600 dots per inch is not equal. And with this resolution target, you can see which vendor's 600 dot per inch is better than some other vendor's 600 dot per inch. So in a nutshell, those are the audits that we go through, and the pages within the PDFs that you have access to after this presentation will have all of these values in them. So in summary, we're looking at gamut size, we're looking at variation or precision, we're looking at accuracy, and we're looking at resolution. Now, these slides are all available to anyone who wants to use them, so I probably should have said that at the beginning. So if anyone wants this presentation, they can most definitely have it. Here are some of the manufacturers and the printers that we looked at in the large format world. Now, I have 6 vendors listed here, and then I have an additional 5 vendors that their data was reviewed, but the vendors submitted the data, and they had the right in order for me to have the vendor do these benchmark tests, I had to promise them that they could be anonymous if they didn't like the results. And so 5 of the vendors took the anonymous route, so I can't tell you who they are because they didn't like the results, and so they're the ones I call blind submissions. Okay, so the first test that we do, and by the way, the dashboard, and I'll be able to show you this dashboard. Here's an Acurio KM1 press, and you see that the 5 benchmarks are listed here on the left, and then over on the right you can see the numbers, and the lower the numbers and the green the green check boxes, the better the device did. Here's a device which will remain anonymous, and you can see there's a lot of red and a much higher numbers, where the other one was had like a 1 here and a 1.9 and a 2. This one's up in the 5 range, and this is the E factor. This is the amount of color difference within one page. So it's no wonder they wanted this device to be anonymous, because there was a lot of variation within that one page, and it doesn't look very favorable on that print technology. Now, it could be that they had a device that hadn't had the regular maintenance, and they didn't change out the consumables on the manufactured recommended sequence. So, you know, you can't always point to it's a bad device. Sometimes it's bad maintenance, and you get what you pay for. So you have to understand what these benchmarks mean. So let's go into the first benchmark, which is the gamut size. And for the gamut size, we use the TC1617 target, and we ask this target to be printed without color management. So on the PDF, you'll see caution, do not print with color management. And we also have that in the instruction set when you get this target to print. So when you print it, you then would measure the TC1617, in this case with a device like an ISIS, or the other form you would use, let's say a X-Ray IO or a Barbieri LFP. And then once you've measured that target, you can essentially enter the data into our ChromaChecker cloud, which will give you free access to, and it will calculate the gamut size. And it will also allow you to compare the gamut size between different devices. So in this case, I'm comparing between a ViewTek and CRPC6, which is Grackle, and it's showing us the green is CRPC6, and in this case, the black outline is the ViewTek. You can see in this scenario, this configuration of the ViewTek will not adequately simulate Grackle. And in fact, the E factor difference is 8.73. So in this scenario, you would not want to use it to try to match Grackle per a customer's expectations. Now, we also quantify the gamut size in our profile inspector. And this is an ISO technical specification in a universal way to define the gamut size for different printing devices. And here the gamut size is 350,000 units. Now you'll see in my benchmark test, this 350,000 isn't very large. It's not bad, but it's not great. So it gives us a way to quantify which device has the biggest gamut. And the other thing that's very useful with the gamut is how many Pantone colors can be rendered within 2 delta E in this gamut. So this gives us the ability to essentially quantify what percentage of the Pantone colors are capable of being rendered on this printing device's condition. And this is very useful because in this scenario, this is showing us of the 1,846 Pantone colors, 1,471 were capable of being rendered within 2 delta E, and it shows us 80% of the Pantone colors on this device, which this happens to be a J-Press, are capable of being rendered. And then these colors here, this has the list of the 1,800 colors, but it stack ranks them with the highest delta E down to the lowest. So you can see the top, in this case, 10 colors with the highest delta E are blues in this real light green. And you can see the light green's about 8 delta E, where the reflex blue is 15 delta E. So even on a digital device that has a nice gamut, the J-Press has a good gamut, there's a lot of colors that are still way out of gamut, and if you're buying this to get reflex blue, it's not going to work real well, because most everybody will say a 15 delta E is an unacceptable level of match. In fact, just for knowledge here, we did psychometric tests using our E-factor metric, and we found that when people judged color, if the E-factor was within 2, virtually everybody said it was an excellent or good match. If it was 9, virtually everybody said it was an unacceptable match. And they had the choice of a poor match, but at 9, it was unacceptable. Where it gets fuzzy is in the 3 to, or I should say about 4 to 8 range, because you might make something that is an 8 E-factor, and there might be some people out there that would say, hey, that's okay, or even a 6. At a 6, well, probably 30% of the people will say, it's probably a fair match. But another 30% of the people will say, that's an unacceptable match. And that's where printers get in trouble, because you might print something all day long for 10 customers, and they love your work. And then you print the same thing for another customer, and they say, no, this is absolutely horrible, this is unacceptable. Well, you know then that their E-factor is tighter than your normal customer. So this is what we'd call a picky customer. And picky customers are how printers often lose money, because then you try to make that customer happy, which might make you have to print multiple times and do extra work on the printer to dial in the color management. And if you can't charge extra for that time and money, chances are you're losing money with this customer that's pickier than your normal customers. So being able to know this up front before you even buy a printing device will save you a ton of nightmares in terms of trying to make picky customers happy, when in fact sometimes customers don't even know that an output device isn't capable of meeting their expectations. So these are things that come up, that following a way to quantify color helps eliminate and helps you fix this before it's a problem. So now, drum roll, we're going to go into the summary of our benchmark gamut test, and I'm stack ranking the vendors that we tested in this category. And the winner at the top of the list is a Canon Colorado. The gamut size was 647 units, and 86% of the spot colors were capable of being rendered within 2 delta E. Second was the Fuji at 543 and 74%. So in this way, you can kind of see how different devices perform. And just as a reference, I put Grackle in this mix. So the Grackle reference condition is 395,000 units in gamut size, and 62% of the Pantone colors are within 2 delta E. So it gives you an idea of a reference in this category. So let's move on to benchmark number 2, which is the variation or the precision benchmarks. This is where we're looking at within page uniformity. And the details on this is, first off, we're looking at precision before accuracy, because you've got to have that, the chicken does come before the egg. You got to have precision before you have accuracy. And there's different types of precision, as we talked about. And one of the targets that we use to do this is this, what we call this VI816 target. And it's a superset of the P2P target, if you're familiar with that target. But it has ramps of cyan, magenta, yellow, black, 3-color gray, and you'll see all the ramps run both vertically and horizontally on the page. And so when this target is measured in, the software automatically compares all like patch values to one another and automatically calculates both delta E's and the 95th percentile delta E's, as well as averages and peaks, to help you see what the variation is on the page. Now, this target is about a 12 by 18 size. So for large format devices, what we do is we position it in the opposite corners, rotated in 90-degree increments of the largest imaging size of the printer that you're using. And then you'll measure all 4 targets in, and then you'll group the targets, and then the software will automatically calculate what the differences are between all the colors in all 4 corners. So it's a very complete analysis of what is going on within the imaging area of the given printing device. And we also use this same target to measure between jobs and within jobs, so we can get an idea of the precision of the device over time. And to share what the data looks like, this is a device with a very high degree of precision. And what we're showing here is the distribution of the solid cyan, magenta, yellow, and the delta E is on the bottom here. So all the yellows, which are 7,100 pairs of solid yellow, the delta E was less than half a delta E, and here you see the peak delta E is less than 0.57. The 95th percentile, so the E factor of the delta E is 0.35. So this is a very precise device. This device is not so precise with not only the solids, but look at the 3-color gray. This is the 100 cyan, 100 magenta, 100 yellow, 0 black patch. This is routinely the most volatile patch that we have in printing. And on some printers, even though it could be dry ink on paper, wet ink on paper, the way that the ink forms the chemical reaction with the paper, the variation in the color of this patch can be quite extensive. Here you see the peak delta E is 6.9 delta E, and the 95th percentile is about 4.21. So there's a lot of variation in the way this device images the 100, 100, 100. And so this is important to know, because this would be a situation where you would definitely want to apply some sort of GCR to your images, because if a customer gave you a page with a lot of 3-color gray, on this printer, it would image blue in the upper right, yellow in the lower left, a little greenish cast on the next page. So you want to try to minimize the separation that you're printing on your printer to try to avoid this type of scenario. Here is a sample of the data. So over here is your E factor, over 1,000 page print run, and we're not measuring all 1,000 pages. We're measuring about every 50. And you can see that the blue line represents the within sheet uniformity. The amber line represents the comparison to the baseline sheet, which was an average of these 4 sheets. That was the average. And so we're looking at what is the variation on that press over time. And this is quite good. And it's about a 1. And people shouldn't always expect a 1, because I have another sample here where here's a press, and you can see the variation over the 1,000 sheet run is up around a 4, over a 4. So this has to do with this actual case in point was lack of maintenance on this printing device. That I've seen this type of printing device image less than a 1. This one obviously was much worse than that. But when I dug into the details of this device was a, we'll call it a mistreated device. It was not maintained. It was not taken care of at all. And hence we have a big variation in this device. Something else that I see with some devices, not all of them, but something to be aware of, is devices that have this startup period where the color in the first 50 prints changes by 2 delta E or 2 E factor, and then it levels off. And so if you're trying to manufacture something to a 2, what you really have to do is figure out what this time period is. Is this 50 sheets? Is this 100 sheets? And then throw those away, and then only keep production from here on out, because then it's stable. So this startup cost is something to be aware of when we're picky about our color and we're learning what our devices are capable of doing. So let's do the drum roll and talk about the precision results. So here's the precision results. So again, the Canon Colorado is number 1 and the Fuji Acuity is number 2. So here are the metrics for your CRF at the 95th percentile. The Canon is 0.6 within the page and 0.8 delta E between the pages. The Acuity was 1 within the page and 0.9 between the pages. This ViewTech we tested was 1.2 within the pages and 1 between the pages. So very interesting numbers here. And again, your device may be different from this, and that's why hopefully you want to check your device. Now the third benchmark is the accuracy benchmark. And on the accuracy benchmark, we have a page that looks real similar to the initial page, but notice on this one it says caution, please use with color management. So when we have with color management, then you should print this through your color managed workflow. And now we're going to assess how close your device is to a given reference condition. It doesn't have to be Grackle. As you can see from some of these large format devices, Grackle is a small gamut compared to what, let's say, an Acuity or a Colorado is capable of producing. So you might want to aim for what's called CRPC 7 or XCMYK, which are larger color spaces that give you more range of color for your device. And again, you can output this device and see how accurate your device is to CRPC 7 or this XCMYK. And this test isn't so much a test for what the mechanics of the printer are capable of. This is actually more of a test for the RIP and how good the color management in the RIP is doing at color converting from your reference condition like Grackle into your printer space like your ViewTech. So this is, be cautious on this because this is more RIP versus printer. And in this scenario, the Fuji Acuity comes out on top with a 1.4 E factor to Grackle, and it passes Grackle color space conformance. The Colorado this time is number 2 at a 1.7. It does also pass color space. And then some of these other devices, a little bit higher numbers, but again, I don't know the knowledge of the operator who did these prints and the RIP. So I can't speak to this being a bad thing. So don't hold it against these devices. It could have just been operator performance. All right. Now, next thing I want to talk about is when we're dealing with different printers. We talked about ideally having each printer matching a given reference condition, such as Grackle. But then the question is, how close do the printers match one another? So in this scenario of the devices matching Grackle, I then went in and said, how close will my Acuity match my ViewTek? How close will it match my SwissQ? So in this dialog, I used the Acuity as my reference, which was 1.4 to Grackle. And you'll see this dart target here. And this dart target shows you the green bullseye is Grackle. So the Acuity is 1.4 rings away from the Grackle bullseye. And the large format Press A was 3.6 from the bullseye. And the visual difference between how the large format Press A and the Fuji Acuity printed was 2.9. So that's decent, that's reasonable. Whereas this next scenario of the Acuity versus large format K, this is like your worst case scenario where the bullseye is between your two printers. So this one was 5.3 to Grackle, this one's 1.4 to Grackle, but because one's at 3 o'clock and one's at 9 o'clock, there's 6.6 from one another. So this is like, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but it's pretty common in the industry. This graphic is not common. This is the first graphic I've ever seen a software program give me that gives me the ability to understand that, boy, I have both my devices matching to Grackle at a 3, but to one another, they're a 6. And I need to fix this because the customer isn't accepting of a 6. So even though my Acuity person did what they needed to do to get it to a close E factor, and my ViewTek person got it to a close E factor, to one another, they're way off, and so we need to then fix it. And so this dialog box helps us understand what's off and how I need to fix it. So when you're integrating a new printer into your existing suite of printers, this information is invaluable to have so that you have an idea of how well this new printer is going to blend in with your existing printers. Okay. The last benchmark we do is the resolution. And for this, we've licensed this contrast resolution target from Franz Sig. And it's a really amazing target. And the idea is that you print it on your different output devices, and then depending upon how fine the resolution is, when you look at these circles down in this area, you will see how well they stay together. So here's two printers that actually advertise the same resolution, and I was told they were both printed at the 600 dot per inch resolution. But you can see clearly from these photos that the one on the left has a much higher actual resolution than the one on the right. The one on the right, you can barely see the circles here, never mind at the 6.25 level. So this is a very non-biased target to help you print on your different devices and then visually compare them to one another. And there's actually a way you can score these printers by looking at where you first start to lose the circles. So here you can clearly see the circles at 4.85, but you lose them here. So this one would be 4.85. This one is more like 1.5. It's way up the list because this is just a cutout of the lower left-hand corner that you see down here. That second printer, you lost the circles right around the 1.35. And you do that for each of these rows, and then you can score which printer has the best effective resolution. Okay? So this helps us understand the machine capabilities, and this is just kind of a summary. So the color gamut and the precision have to do with the printing device and, of course, the substrate that you're printing on. The accuracy has more to do with how the prepress and the RIP is set up. And so by knowing what variables affect which conditions, you know where to look for to find the problem. So let's now talk about the data. Like I said, these forms are available for you to print out. And Dan, how many people do we have on the call with us today? Kind of springing this on you, but
Yeah, we have a fairly small group, but
okay. Well,
what I can do is reach out to everybody individually.
well, that being said, I'll offer everyone who's on the call today the ability to measure these targets for you. So essentially, you can tell me that you'd like these targets. Here's the actual PDFs. Mm-hmm. Here's our 12 by 18 form. And one of the great things about this, you might want to print two if you want me to measure them for you and give you the results, is that you can line these up next to one another. So you can print this out of printer A, printer B, printer C, and then here's a real life picture when I was at a customer where we're lining up. This is a scenario where we were checking to see how many profiles we needed to make for different substrates. So that's another use for this. So this company felt they had a 2 E factor of tolerance, and they print 30 different substrates on their printing device. And at a 2, they need 16 different ICC profiles to represent the 30 conditions. And I said, well, let's see if we went to a 3 E factor. That 16 profiles went down to 9. Managing 9 profiles for 30 different substrates is going to be much easier than managing 16 profiles for 30 different substrates. So in this area, these were all 3 from one another. And you can see the user here was looking to see whether or not that amount of variation was acceptable, to see whether or not we could go to 9 versus the 16. And so these forms are really useful to help you understand what the differences are. This form is great if the paper is less than 25 mil thick. And then this is the second form that we have, which is designed for like a Barbieri or an IO. And this can be printed at any thickness. And essentially what we did was we arranged the images here so that you can put the images next to one another. So if you want to see how your ViewTek on a thick styrene prints versus your Inca on a thin board stock, you can actually line the images up next to one another and see very clearly what that difference is. So these forms are free for you to have and to print and to either measure yourself. I'll give you the full instructions on how to measure these yourself, or you can submit them to me and I will be happy to measure them for you. Just make sure you label the forms in this area so I know what I'm measuring, and so when I get it back to you, you'll know what you're getting. And think of it as a free audit to see how your devices are performing.
Okay, David, is that the end of the presentation?
Yeah,
okay.
Take any questions that anyone might have.
We're kind of right up at the end of the program here, but I did want to just add something in. I was really struck by the example you just gave about the company, with 30 different substrates and all these different profiles, and the idea of squeezing that down to, what was it, 9 profiles?
Yeah.
And that was okay. That was acceptable.
Yeah, that was okay.
Yeah, and I guess the example here is that we've had a lot of programs about color management, about ways to approach this, but it really comes down to making your production not only higher quality, but more manageable. That management part of color management is so important, and I thought that was just a phenomenal example.
Yeah, it's really useful. I had a company that had 13 roll-ins, and they print on the same material. And the question was, do I need 13 different profiles or do I need just one?
Yeah.
And so I took the measurement data in and I asked them what their expectations were, and their expectations were, I'm remembering it was like a 3. And each of the 13 devices imaged color within a 3.2 of one another. So they were so thrilled because they only had to manage one. And this software tells them which Roland, it was Roland number 10, which was most like the other 13.
It was the midpoint, sort of.
Yeah, so you profile Roland 10, and then you share that profile with all the other Rolands, and the guy who was managing their color was like, "Oh my goodness, this is almost too easy."
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Well, thanks for the presentation today. We always appreciate having you present for SGIA, and we look forward to working with you again in the future.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
And for those of you who joined us, thanks for being with us, and we will see you online again soon. Don't forget to mark your calendars for Printing United coming up October 23 through 25 in Dallas, Texas. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.